Welcome to this workshop on ethical use of AI with a focus on generative AI. Today, we'll explore one of the most important topics facing leaders, educators, and professionals as AI becomes part of the everyday work. This workshop will focus on how to use generative AI responsibly, balancing innovation with accountability. We will look at the ethical use of AI and what it really means in practice. We will also discuss issues like transparency, data privacy, bias, and human oversight. We will walk through real-world examples of where AI adds value and where safeguards are essential. By the end, you'll have a better understanding of how to make informed, ethical decisions when applying AI in your role, your organization, or your classroom. Upon completion of this unit, you will be able to identify common ethical issues associated with generative AI use, explain the principles of responsible AI, analyze AI-related ethical dilemmas using structured case scenarios, evaluate organizational and individual AI use practices, and lastly, create a draft of an internal AI use policy. Because this is a pre-recorded lesson, you'll pause at specific moments to complete hands-on prompts and the worksheet activities. By the end, you will have a draft internal AI use policy statement, a scenario plan, and increased confidence in guiding your team in the use of AI. Let's go ahead and begin. Before we get started, please pause and download the worksheet, Ethical Use of AI, Generative AI in Practice. Keep this worksheet handy and complete each activity and exercise in sections 1 through 4 and save your answers as we proceed through this unit. You'll need these answers to upload at another point in the course. With that said, let's get started by making sure that we're aligned on exactly what we mean by generative AI. Simply put, these are systems that create new content. For example, a large language model generating an article, a text-to-image tool creating an image, a text-to-audio tool creating a song, or a text-to-video tool generating a talking avatar. And we've looked at this in other areas within the program. So let's take a look really quick. Go over here to the worksheet. You'll see the worksheet there. This is the one you just downloaded. We're going to need this as we go throughout the course because you're going to complete these sections and you're going to enter your information in there. Now, I shared with you a basic understanding of what is generative AI. You can use that as an example. You can create your own. And I also would suggest that you come in and you actually use your large language model or whatever AI you're using, and you dig a little deeper, get a really good understanding of exactly what we're talking about in each of these sections. So here we see that, what generative AI is. It goes over it. It talks about how it works, prompts and inputs and things. So you can go as deep as you want to. But the point is that you're going to complete these sections and you're going to come back over here and you're going to provide your answer. So if you think about it in your work as a consultant, coach, educator, entrepreneur, or other professional role, you may use generative AI for content creation, as I mentioned above. You might use it to summarize or categorize information. You might use it for communication, automation, analyzing data, or many other purposes. These are just a few of the many ways that you can actually use generative AI to create output. Our focus during this unit is going to be specifically on the ethical implications of using generative AI. Now let's identify the major ethical issues that emerge when using generative AI, and we'll examine suggestions for mitigating risk. The suggested steps are just that, suggested, and you are responsible for what you do or do not do to protect yourself and your organization. First, we have misinformation and hallucinations. AI tools can produce output that sound credible but are incorrect, misleading, or incomplete. For example, a large language model might generate a fabricated citation or make a factual error without warning. To mitigate this risk, I suggest that you always apply human-in-the-loop review and fact-checking before publishing AI-generated content. You are the human in the loop, and you are always responsible for the output and how you use output from AI. I encourage you to treat generative AI outputs as drafts rather than final products. And I also encourage you to maintain logs of prompt to output versions to enable traceability of where errors occurred. Use AI models that provide metadata or confidence scores where available, and treat low confidence outputs with caution. You can always ask the AI to provide a confidence score. And let me show you really quick here what I have done in my settings to always add the confidence level of your answer. And that's put in my custom instructions. So everything I do pulls from that and gives me a confidence level for the answer that it's providing. That way I don't have to think about it. It's just there. You can also just ask or prompt the AI to provide you with a confidence level of the information that it just provided you. You can also use 2 or more AIs to be able to compare output for consistency and accuracy. For example, you could use an AI like ChatGPT and then use another like Claude, ask the same questions, ask the same prompts, and then compare output for consistency and accuracy to help with overcoming misinformation and hallucinations. A second ethical issue that we face with generative AI is intellectual property and copyright risk. The model may have been trained on copyrighted material, or your generated output may inadvertently infringe on copyright. So therefore, to mitigate this, it's important to use officially licensed or open access training data where possible. Avoid prompting for verbatim reproductions of copyrighted text or media. Include attribution or disclosure when output actually draws on third-party content. Adopt organizational policies and guidelines that require legal review for outputs intended for commercial or external publication. A third ethical issue that we may be confronted with is bias and fairness. If training data reflects human biases, the output may perpetuate stereotypes or unfairness. To mitigate this, I suggest that you perform bias audits of your model outputs across demographics, cultural, and linguistic dimensions. Implement human-in-the-loop review, especially when content affects individuals or groups. Choose model providers who publish fairness, metrics, and mitigations in their process. And then also include diverse testing scenarios in your rollout plan to identify unintended bias early so that you can make changes. Fourth, we're faced with privacy and data protection. If you feed sensitive, proprietary, or personal data into a model, you may risk exposing or leaking that information. To mitigate this, avoid using personal identifiable information, or what is often known as PII, or confidential client data in your prompts unless use on-premises or controlled environmental models if necessary for sensitive data rather than public cloud tools. Implement a data handling policy specifying permissible inputs and masking or redacting sensitive documents. Secure prompt output logs and restrict access to those records under your governmental policy. Lastly, I suggest you always read the terms of service or use and privacy policies associated with all AI that you use. You know, those things where you scroll and you just check off, that is something that you really need to stop, read, make sure you understand who owns the data, how the data is handled, how long it's stored, and different things like that. You can scan it. You don't have to read verbatim, but you do need to read, and you do need to be aware of what the policies are regarding privacy and use case for you specifically. A fifth ethical issue that we may face is transparency and explainability. Often AI models are a black box. So who is accountable, and are you, or is it the end user? Being aware of the limitations is very important. To mitigate these kinds of situations, it's important to disclose to stakeholders when generative AI is being used and what role it played. For example, AI assisted draft, human reviewed, different things along those lines. Maintain records of prompt templates, versioning, and reviewer decisions so that you can show audit trails. This also plays back into what we learned about creating prompts And that's to be able to keep prompts that are consistent, that get us the same thing over and over again. So this just plays into the whole idea of maintaining records and keeping up with the prompts and the prompt templates and versioning that we use. Also, you can choose models providers that provide explainability, and that means the ability to explain exactly what's happening. So explainability features might be, for example, source citations, provenance. When possible, use these kinds of models and providers that provide these kinds of capabilities. Then we also have train users in the organization to understand model limitations. For example, what are hallucinations? What are the risk of hallucinations? The lack of domain specific knowledge and things along those lines. Lastly, our environmental and sustainability impacts. Large models consume significant computing power and energy, which raises long-term ethical questions. So to mitigate this, choose model usage patterns that optimize efficiency. For example, batch processing, limiting unnecessary reruns, and things along those lines. Use smaller footprint models or subset fine-tuned models for specific tasks. Track the carbon or energy cost of AI workloads and incorporate sustainability metrics into your governance review. Consider offsetting or choosing providers or data centers powered by low carbon energy sources. As you review these limitations and suggestions, note how they may show up in your own use cases. What type of content are you generating? What data are you feeding into the AI? Who reviews the output and what oversight you put in place? In the worksheet, you'll map your own risk mitigation plan accordingly. So let's go over here and let's take a look really quick. We'll scroll down here and we'll see key issues and we'll fill this out. We may have skipped this up here and we need to make sure we fill out our list of 2 examples of how we'd use and plan use, and then also our key ethical issues in generative AI. And the thing is that you can either pull from what I shared, or you can use your AI to actually copy your table in, prompt, and ask for a completion of this particular table so that you can go through and review and get a feel for what are the key ethical issues, descriptions and why it matters, real world examples, and possible mitigation. So you can do a combination of using what I've shared, inputting what you know from your experience, and then also, like I said, copying and pasting this in and prompting the AI to help you complete this table, and then you review it as the human in the loop. Let's walk through a short real-world style mini case scenario. Please pause the video now and complete the worksheet, section 1.3, case analysis, the marketing scenario, and list which issues apply in this scenario and explain why using the bullet list. When you're done, let's resume. Welcome back. Now that you've completed the case analysis marketing scenario in the worksheet, let's look at the case together. Our scenario was a marketing team uses a generative AI tool to write blog posts. They feed in proprietary customer data, names, purchase history, and basically that's to help the model draft personalized content. They publish these posts directly without human review. A few days later, a client's name is exposed, and the content contains factual errors that damage the client's brand and reputation. Which of the ethical issues that we just listed apply here? Immediately, we see privacy and data protection risks. The client's data was leaked. We also see misinformation and hallucination risk, the factual errors that occurred. We might also have intellectual property concerns, what the customer data was used for and was it used appropriately. Then there's transparency and accountability. The team published without a human review, so oversight was missing. Now it's time for your first hands-on activity. As you see here, our task is going to be to use a generative AI tool that you have access to, so a tool of your choice. You're going to then prompt the AI to generate a short article, approximately 250 words, on the topic why small business owners should embrace generative AI tools for marketing. Then you're going to review it and you're going to identify at least 3 ethical risks present in the output or usage scenario. That's going to be in section 1.4 of your handout. As we come over here and we look, You have a prompt that you're going to use, and you can just basically grab that prompt and you can go to your AI and you will input it in your AI. So let me go up here and start a new chat. We'll put in our scenario. Okay, so we come in here and we look at this, be the human in the loop. It's our responsibility to review everything. So we're going to review the output for accuracy. Before using, we're going to paste or summarize below what we generated in terms of our text from our prompt. And then we're going to identify the 3 ethical risks that we identified. So again, we're using our prompt to be able to accomplish this. And here are the 3 ethical concerns. Having identified the ethical issues, let's shift to our ethical responsibilities. Using generative AI doesn't absolve us of accountability. In fact, it heightens it. Responsible use means aligning what you do with ethical values and actively mitigating harm rather than just assuming that the tool is safe. We can think of responsibilities on 3 levels: the individual user, which is us, you; the organizational level, your team or company policies; and the provider or designer of the tool, who built or supplies the model. In this exercise, we're going to focus on what you can do as the user or team leader, but you'll also understand how this connects at other levels above you, beside you, and below you, and outside of your organization. Make sure you put your findings inside of your worksheet. And you'll see here, you've got the place to be able to put it at section 2.1, responsibility pyramid, and you can enter your information here. Here we find the core principles of responsible AI that should guide responsible generative AI use. We have transparency or explainability. You and your stakeholders should understand how the AI is used and what limitations it may have. We've got fairness and non-discrimination. It's important for us to ensure the outputs don't perpetuate bias or exclude groups. We have accountability and human oversight. You must maintain human in the loop, review decisions, and be clear who is responsible. We also have privacy and data protection. You must safeguard data input and avoid leaking sensitive information. Beneficence. Strive to do good and avoid harm. Don't treat AI as a shortcut that bypasses ethics. Lastly, we have sustainability. Be aware of the environmental and compute costs associated with large models and choose responsibly. As you build your policy or process, use the worksheet. These principles should anchor you in terms of your choices. We're going to do our policy checker here, and we're going to make sure that we know who is responsible in the process. Let's talk about organizational or governance level responsibilities. Your team or company must set up clear frameworks so you're not relying purely on ad hoc decisions. You should establish usage policies, decide who can access generative AI tools for what purposes and under what conditions. Control the data you feed into the model and always anonymize where possible and avoid uploading proprietary or sensitive data. You always need human in the loop review. Have this built into your human review workflows. AI outputs should not go live without verification for accuracy, bias, or unintended consequences. Be transparent with your clients and end users. If AI is used to generate content, you should tell them. And finally, conduct a risk assessment before rolling out a new use case. Ask, what could go wrong? Who is impacted? How will we monitor outcomes? Pause now and consider, how would you establish or refine your own organization's policies in one sentence and note it in your worksheet? This brings us to hands-on activity number 2. Using your worksheet, draft a short internal policy statement, about 150 to 200 words, that your team or organization could adopt for ethical use of generative AI tools. The statement should include what uses are permitted, which data inputs are prohibited, who will review the outputs, and how you'll disclose AI usage to clients or stakeholders. After drafting this statement, use the checklist to verify that you've addressed the core principles from the previous slide: transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, beneficence, and sustainability. Make sure you input your findings, your outcomes from this particular activity into your worksheet so that it'll be there when it comes time to upload this later. Now let's engage in some critical thinking before we move to reflection. I'll pose 3 questions. Feel free to pause the video and write your thoughts into your worksheet. First, if an AI output is factually incorrect yet appears plausible, who should be held responsible? The tool provider, the individual user, or the organization that deployed it? Second, suppose a generative AI tool uses training data that includes biased content or copyrighted material without clear licensing. Who bears the legal or ethical risk? And lastly, number 3, how transparent should you be with end users or clients about the fact that content was generated or semi-generated by AI? Should you disclose every time, only for some uses, or not at all? Write down your positions now in your worksheet. We'll revisit some of these during the reflection time. And you will find section 2.4, the critical thinking journal, where you can input your answers. As we move into reflection, let's focus on your personal role. Many people think, I'm just using the tool, but even in that scenario, your decisions matter. Which prompts you use, what data you upload, how you review results, and whether you publish them. There's a concept called moral outsourcing where people often shift responsibility to the tool. The AI generated it, so it's not my fault. That's a misstep. You still carry responsibility for what you deploy. So this slide is a reminder, you remain accountable. Take a moment to reflect on what is your responsibility, what is your role in overseeing ethical AI use in your immediate work. Write down your reflections in your handout. Here's a self-assessment checklist for you. Please go through it and tick each item or mark progress in your worksheet. Do I understand what data I upload or share with the tool? Do I verify the outputs for accuracy before publishing or acting on them? Do I check generated content for bias, fairness, or inclusive language? Do I disclose where AI was used in a way fitting for my role or clients? Do I maintain records of the prompts? Do I ensure that any AI use aligns with my organization's values and policies? Complete this honestly, and it will help you to identify gaps that you need to address. Please go to your handout and complete this self-assessment checklist that you will find in section 3.2. Finally, let's apply all we've covered to your personal context. On your worksheet, consider a scenario from your work or one you anticipate where you are able to use generative AI, perhaps for content creation, marketing, coaching, communications, or analytics. Then answer the following questions. How would you apply the tool? What ethical risks should you check for in the scenario? What oversight or human in the loop process will you put in place? For example, review, approval, versioning, what will it be? How will you monitor outcomes over time? Did the tool perform as expected? Pause now and complete the worksheet. When you're done, resume the video for wrap up. And here you'll find the scenario 3.3. Let's look at our key takeaways. First, the ethical issues involved in generative AI are real and varied, from misinformation and hallucinated content, bias, privacy and IP concerns, and longer-term sustainability issues. Second, responsibility doesn't lie solely with the tool. You as the user, your organization, and the provider are all responsible and share accountability. Third, moving from awareness to action is critical. Reflection, policy, scenario planning, and oversight turn good intentions into responsible practices. You're not using AI, you're governing how AI is used. Make sure that you insert your final takeaways and your commitment statement in your ethics worksheet. What are your next steps? First, we're going to complete the worksheet, all of section 1 through 4. Make sure that's included. and completed. And then you're going to upload your completed worksheet when instructed. You're going to integrate your drafted internal policy and basically introduce a team process. Schedule a 30-day review of any generative AI use cases, evaluate adherence, outcomes, unforeseen risk, even if this is just for yourself, whether it's for a team, whether it's for an organization, or again for yourself. And then I encourage you to explore additional resources. For example, the UNESCO AI ethical guidelines and other ethical AI use and responsible AI use policies. Consider integrating the internal policy that you drafted into your team process, even if only a draft today. You'd be amazed at how many organizations do not have an AI tools usage or just a general AI usage policy, and they're critical. Schedule a review 30 days of any generative AI use cases in your domain. Check whether the policies were followed, whether outcomes match expectations, and whether any new risk emerged. If you like to go deeper, then I encourage you to seek out other resources like UNESCO's AI guidelines, governance frameworks, or joining a peer group discussion on AI ethics. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for investing your time. I'm confident that you now are better equipped to guide and govern generative AI use responsibility in your organization and for yourself.